Hello folks, my name is Mark. This is Why I Hate the World. How's everybody doing out there? So, I made a video about 2 weeks ago about the Elliot Rogers shooting. If you guys don't remember, that was about a guy that flipped out in Santa Barbara and killed 14 people, and it turned out that he had this manifesto and he used a lot of the language that was connected to, you know, pickup artists and MRA and stuff like that. So anyway, I put this video up and I've gotten quite a, you know, for me, a big reaction. You know, I mean, my videos don't usually get a lot of hits anyway, but this one, you know, I got a lot of negative comments, right? But in the video, I basically said that, you know, in my experience, that MRA people tended to be assholes, you know. They tended to be a bunch of spoiled fucking shit-munching douche needles. And if you take a look at the comment section for that video, I think that turned out to be a pretty good assessment. So, but whatever, you know. I mean, I even got a pwnage video. Somebody made one where they, like, you know, quoted my video and shit, and then stuff like that, and that's fine. I mean, I don't really care when people, I don't care too much when people call me names and shit, you know, as long as they don't, like, physically threaten me, it's like, it's not a big deal. But, what I didn't get, however, were very many comments of people actually trying to talk to me about men's rights and the issues, right, which is actually surprising, you know. But, I mean, I guess, well, actually, I guess it's not surprising because I didn't really talk about the issues in that video, but whatever. There were a couple, you know, a couple of posters actually did mention some issues, though, so I thought I'd like to take this opportunity to kind of, you know, talk a little bit about that. So, let's see here. One of them was, you know, male circumcision. That seems to be a big issue when it comes to MRA people for some reason. And I don't really understand why. I mean, like, so what? Like, male circumcision. Like, what's the big fucking deal, you know? I mean, the thing is, if you want your kid to be circumcised, then get him circumcised. You know, if you don't want him to be circumcised, then don't get him circumcised. I mean, what's the fucking problem, you know? I mean, I know that the argument can be made that, you know, the newborn is not giving his consent, and so they, you know, they should wait until they're old enough to actually give the consent to do it, right? Yeah, well, maybe that's true, right? But the thing is that circumcision is usually a religious practice, right? And in this country, you have freedom of religion, and that includes, you know, choosing the religion for your children, right? And your children get to decide once they get old enough whether or not they want to follow that, right? But when they're newborns, they don't get to decide it. Okay, that's just how it is. All right, newborn children are incapable of giving consent. All right. In fact, children in general are incapable of giving consent, and as the parent, it is your right under the Constitution, right, to decide these things for them. Now, whether you think that's correct or not, or just or whatever, that's a different story. Okay, but I don't like the idea of limiting people's freedom of religion because you don't like a certain body modification that they do, right? Now, if it was truly damaging, you know, like if circumcising, you know, your wee-wee, like, you know, damaged it beyond repair, that'd be a different story, okay? But it doesn't damage it beyond repair. I mean, shit, you know, millions of people out there have circumcised, you know, they've been circumcised and they're absolutely fucking fine, so it just doesn't really, I don't really see the issue with it, you know? It doesn't affect, I don't even see why you would even give a fuck. It just, whatever, right? Another issue was the sentencing gap in our jail system, and I guess this is a big deal also. If you take a look at, for instance, there's a subreddit on Reddit called Our Men's Rights, and, you know, or if you go there or any other MRM website or blog, you know, you'll find postings where people will post news articles about women who are getting off easy, you know, and it'll be some shit like, you know, she gets to murder people and gets off easy because she has a vagina or something like that, right? You'll see shit like that all the time, you know, it'll be, and they're usually like really extreme cases, you know, woman stabs a guy 50 times, gets 5 years, that kind of thing, yeah, and then they'll post something right next to it, and it'll be like, this guy just, you know, randomly brushed his car up against someone and got 50 years to life, or, you know, there's always these posts that you'll see on websites like this where they're comparing, you know, men versus women and the jail system, and how it's so fucked up against men and whatever. And the thing is that, you know, it's an unfair comparison, right? Now, before I go on, you know, it actually is true. There is a sentencing gap, right? Men do tend to get more jail time than women for the same crime, okay? But there's a reason for this shit, okay? You know, things like, I mean, if we're talking about violent crime, right, most of the time, men, you know, the perpetrators of violent crime tend to be men, okay? That's just a simple fact, you know, that women tend to not hold up liquor stores, right, or mug people in the streets, or carjack people, or break into people's houses and fucking murder them while they sleep and shit like that, right? You know, women only make up about 12 to 15% of the inmates in this country, right? And they just simply don't engage in violent crime in the same numbers that men do, okay? And those women who do get convicted of stuff like that, you know, manslaughter or murder, right? The victim tends to be their male boyfriends or husbands that abused them, you know. And, well, just think about it for a second. Like, what kind of effect does that have on a jury, you know? Like, they got, their defense was like, yeah, well, I shot the guy, but he was beating the shit out of me for 20 years, right? That can affect a jury, okay? And the circumstances will affect the jury, and it affects the way that they're, you know, it affects the way that they're sentenced, right? And I'm sure it'd be a lot different if it was like, yeah, just some random, you know, she went into a, you know, if it was some random crime, like she went into a liquor store with a pantyhose over her head and like just shot the guy and stole all the money, you know, I doubt that she'd get a lighter sentence, right, in that case, okay? If somebody can show that to me, you know, show me some examples of a woman engaging in some random crime, that the same kind of thing that a man does, and getting off easy. The thing is, I'm sure it probably happens. You know, I admit that this disparity takes place, but I don't think that it's that big of a deal. I mean, the thing is, I see the reason why it happens, you know. I mean, it's wrong. Yeah, maybe it's wrong, but I don't think it's any more wrong than somebody getting a lighter sentence because the crime they committed was in the heat of the moment or something like that, you know. There actually is a legal defense term for that. I can't remember what it is, but, you know, combined with this, women also have much lower recidivism rates, right? They're more likely to go to jail and then get out and then get on with their lives and actually not go back to jail, unlike men who, you know, it's something like 17% versus 36%, you know, for men. So it's definitely, you know, it's just not, it's not a fair comparison. It really isn't, you know. I don't know. I mean, there is a disparity, but in my opinion, it's not a disparity worth forming a movement over, right? So another issue was preventing male suicide, which is fine, but, you know, why only male suicide? You know, why not prevent everybody suicide for both genders and all ages and races or whatever? It's like, why is it only male suicide? I don't know. How is that a man's rights issue? I don't really get that. Domestic abuse. Okay, so now this is one that you'll see a lot too. You'll see a lot of things like female perpetrators of domestic abuse don't get charged and shit like that, right? And, well, it depends on what you're talking about when you talk about domestic abuse. Because, for instance, I went on there today and there was a link to an article where it showed this woman, and it was like, this woman is engaging in a pattern of domestic abuse over 20 years, and if it was a man, she'd be in jail. And then you follow the link, and it's actually not really domestic abuse. It's more of just an insane woman who, when she got dumped, was, you know, harassment and shit like that. And that's not the same thing. You know, domestic abuse is not like harassment, right? Domestic abuse is beating the crap out of your, like, spouse, right? Beating your spouse, you know, physical violence towards your spouse, raping your spouse, shit like that. That's domestic abuse, okay? And the thing is, I'm not stupid enough to say that it never happens to men, because it does, right? The thing is, it's more likely to be, you know, men are more likely, once again, to be the perpetrators of it, okay? And women are less likely to, you know, engage in it and to be the offender. And the thing is, it's It's also worth saying that most of the time, now, I'm qualifying this with these words, most of the time, more likely, right? But most of the time, women are less capable of physically injuring a man without some kind of weapon, without stabbing him with a kitchen knife or, beating him with a club or something, right? Most of the time, which is not always to say the case. You could be dating some kung fu expert or something or whatever, but, a girl punches you in the face, right? Usually you can take it. You can get punched in the face unless she's like really big and strong. It's not gonna, do the same kind of damage that an average guy, even some guy like me who only works out like, once a week if I'm lucky, even a guy like me could do punching like a woman who's half my size. It's just not, it's not a fair, once again, it's just not a fair comparison. They don't, and I don't know. The thing is, I'm not going to say it never happens. I'm not going to say that there aren't women who systematically abuse their husbands, because I'm sure there are, but it's just not in the same scale, right? It doesn't happen as often, and when it does happen, it's not, as intense, right? So there's reasons for that, because that's another thing that they'll say is like, well, when the cops show up, they are, they'll arrest the man automatically, or they always believe the woman, or they'll take the man out and put him in handcuffs or whatever in every domestic violence case, right? Yes, they do, right? And there's a reason for that, because once again, men are more likely to engage in domestic violence. When the cops show up, the man is more likely to flip out and try to fight the cops, or try to be in a rage and have to be restrained, Yeah, it's just that's a policy that was enacted for a reason, because it's just fucking experience, all right? The woman is, and the thing is, if the cops were to show up and the woman was going fucking crazy and swinging around a baseball bat or something, they'd restrain her too. Okay, don't say they wouldn't, because they would. So it's just it just doesn't seem to be a problem to me. Anyway, so another issue is rape, and it's specifically men being raped, and more specifically, men being raped by women. And that seems to be a big problem that the MRA people are always up in arms about. The thing is that that's once again, it's not a big problem. The thing is, all right, there's different kinds of rape, okay? So if you're going to talk about statutory rape, right, one of the things I'll say is women will, they can get away with it, right? They can get away with statutory rape of a, small boy or something. And that's not always the case, right? Women go to prison just as often for the same thing. You see these news stories about some teacher has sex with a 12-year-old boy and she goes to prison for 10 years and shit like that. Happens all the time, okay? Right, is there a sentencing disparity? Yes, we already talked about that. Something else of note is that an attractive woman will get a lighter sentence than an unattractive woman, right? That also works if an attractive man gets, will also get a lighter sentence, so that has nothing to do with gender, right? Because people are going to mention that, got to bring that up. So anyway, getting back to rape, one of the things was women, men being raped by women. Once again, I'm not going to say it doesn't happen, because it does, right? There's a thing by a stat by the CDC that said somewhere in the area of 4.8% of men have been made to penetrate, somebody else, right? And something in the area of 1 in 71 men will be raped in their lifetime, right? The thing is that, first off, it doesn't compare, because compare that to women, right? 1 in 5 women will be raped. So 4.8% of men, right, are raped by women, right, made to penetrate, right? Although that doesn't say that if they're made to penetrate women or other men, okay, which I'm sure could happen, right? And also compare that to about 20% of women being raped. Okay, it's just not a comparison. It's 5 times the amount of women get raped, are more likely to be raped 5 times more than men are. It's just not even, Secondly, a man is more likely to be raped by another man than a woman. Okay, it's just, And, you know, even if you don't count prison rape, you're more likely to be raped by another man, right, you know, than a woman. But just getting back to it, when they say made to penetrate, like, you know, what does that mean exactly? Like, what, just put a gun to your head and, like, you know, get it up or I'm gonna fucking blow it off or whatever? Like, is that what they're talking about? Not really. I think what they mean when they say made to penetrate is that you're drugged, or maybe she got you drunk and had sex with you or something like that. And, you know, yeah, I'm not going to say that that isn't rape, because it can be, right? It can be rape to drug somebody and then while they're intoxicated have sex with them, right? I would say, though, that that's fuzzy, you know, because obviously there's some kind of consent going on and you might regret it the next day, but that doesn't mean that it's fucking rape. But I'm not going to open that can of worms. I don't even want to talk about that shit. But anyway, that, though, is, I do want to say that that is a lot different than, you know, say violent rape, okay? Because there are no stats, right, out there that I could find. Maybe somebody else can find them, where it talked about the amount of violent rape of, you know, women against men, like beating this, you know, because like when you say rape, you know, a certain thing comes to mind when you talk about rape, right? It sounds like, you know, that there's a connotation there where it's like somebody getting their ass kicked in an alley and then beaten unconscious and then violated, right? That, you know, that happens a lot. That kind of thing happens, you know, violent rape where like a woman is held down and, you know, bloodied and then clothes torn off and all that shit, right? And does that kind of thing happen to men? Like, does that happen where a woman will go and you know, physically incapacitate a man and kick the shit out of him and then rape him? Not really, right? And the amount that do happens under that 4.8%, okay? So it's just not a fucking problem. I mean, it doesn't compare, right? The problem is, in my opinion, almost insignificant. Women forcibly raping men it's almost insignificant. You know, I'm not going to say that it's not completely 100% insignificant, but it's almost to the point where I don't have to worry about it. You know, like if I go out on a date with somebody, well, I'm not now because I'm actually in a very good relationship, but, you know, my girlfriend, I don't have to worry about me coming home one day and her just beating the crap out of me with a baseball bat and then raping me. This shit is just not going to happen, you know. I would be worried about, you know, another guy doing that. Okay, so it's just, I don't know. There was one thing that I do happen to agree with that these guys said, and it was the gap in divorce treatment for males and male parenting rights. And these guys do have a point, okay? There is most definitely a gap in the way that, you know, divorce laws in particular favor women over men. You know, women will get alimony, right? They'll things like she'll automatically get you know, custody of the children, right? The man will end up paying, and he'll get his visitation rights will be you know, limited and things like that, and he'll be forced to get a second job and blah 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 blah. That kind of thing definitely does occur. I definitely agree there. Okay, that actually is a problem. And in some states in this country, there has been progress made on those fronts, right? Used to be automatically in California, if you married someone, you could divorce them a year later and you get everything they owned. That doesn't necessarily happen very much anymore. You know, it's kind of sort of like you still will have battles over, like, you know, property and shit like that, but it's not the same as it was 20 years ago. You know, there have been some reforms in these areas, right? But, you know, once again, the thing is I acknowledge the reasons why these laws are put there in the first place. See, the reason why we have alimony, right, is because back in the day, you know, 40, 50 years ago, back in the, you know, 70s and 60s and 50s, if divorce would be like a seriously life-changing event for a woman, you know, and it would be something like most women would stay home and take care of the kids and not have any relevant job skills. And then shit goes bad and they get divorced. Now all of a sudden they have the kids and they can't get a job, right? And that's, you know, they end up going on welfare, they end up becoming prostitutes, you know, they'd end up having to marry somebody else that they didn't want to, or whatever, or more, which was more likely, they would just stay in the marriage and you know, live a miserable fucking life for like, you know, 50 years or whatever, right? And it was because there was no legal thing in place to provide for them, right? Well, you know, nowadays that's not actually that true. You know, now we have women in the, you know, women working and you know, making almost as much as men do, even though they don't. But you know, and it's not as relevant. So I could definitely see, you know, I see the reason why these laws were enacted, and I see the reason why this disparity is there. I just don't, you know, and I see, but I also see improvements in these areas, and I don't think that, you know, it's that big of a problem. I mean, it is a major problem. Okay, I'm gonna take that back. I take that back. It is a major problem. Men are discriminated against here, but there were reasons why for it. And so I guess in this area, I do agree with the MRM people. Just, I think it's, you know, the rest of their movement is bullshit. Okay, there's probably a lot more stuff that I'm skipping over, and you know, whatever, and I'm sure I'm probably gonna get a ton of shit for this video too, but what can I say, guys? You know, it just doesn't seem like the majority of the shit that you guys complain about. It just seems to me that it's just complaining. You know, that's what it seems like. It's complaining, and you know, like and not a lot of stuff is being done about it. And you know, and it seems like you're all just there getting in your little forums and bitching in the fucking echo chamber, and nobody does anything, nobody says anything. Like one of the things in the comment section of my other video, I said, like, I asked a guy, I'm like, hey, are there any, you know, organizations out there that, you know, provide help for men in these situations? You know, are there any charities out there, right? And nobody could name any of them for me. Like somebody listed something that was like a family planning thing, and then another MRA thing that, you know, but they, what they did was they went and filed lawsuits. You know, they didn't do any, like, you know, battered men's shelters, right, or legal defense fund for men that were like falsely accused of rape or something, or anything like that. It doesn't seem to be very much in the way of activism when it comes to men's rights activists, right? And that's why, personally, I think it's just not, I don't know, it's not really a real movement, you know, it's just more of just guys getting on the internet and fucking complaining about shit that doesn't even really affect most people. So, I don't know. Probably gonna get a ton of shit for this, but I don't even care anymore. Adios.